Hello, you multiplied maltsters. And thank you to Jenny G for that malt mention. Welcome to the Bothy. I'm Ralphie. This is Ralphie Review 939 Extras. With the extras, I go into information over and above orthodox specific reviews of quality spirits, being primarily single malt Scotch whisky. Now, I have just reviewed a bottle of 10-year-old Benromach, and what I would tell you about this is that it is a delightfully naturally complex whisky with a good array of sensations in it. Now, I'm not talking about flavours. Lemon is a flavour that contains a sensation. It contains sour, it contains bitter, it can contain sweet. You can get sweet lemon, sour lemon, bitter lemon. You can get salty lemon. You can get savoury lemon. But the lemon itself is a flavour, but it's accompanied by sensations. And one of the things that makes Scotch whisky so unique and complicated in the world of spirits, but it applies to all spirits globally, is that alcohol is a very good holder of complexity, of both flavour and sensation, and it holds them together. They can last thousands of years without deteriorating. Literally thousands of years. The longest shelf life for any product, unless it's seriously dry, in seriously dry conditions, is something that's stored in alcohol. And in fact, in ancient times when distilling was invented, primarily for the production of perfume initially, so the history books tell us, but what do you believe nowadays? Because there's so much misinformation and disinformation out there. We've really got to kind of do our own research. But distillation came from the alchemists because they were creating the fusion of two elements of fire and water into one element, which was spirit. Which is why it's called spirit, because it's the spirits of element. One of the remarkable properties was not just that alcohol would hold strong and complex flavours for a long period of time, but in sufficient strength it would hold the potency of herbaceous herbal medicines, poisons, and perfumes. Another classic example. You could really concentrate so that in alcohol a small amount of perfume could be very long lasting and very complicated, and there you have it. Wonderful invention, distilling. Remarkably simple and yet full of complexities. And one of the complexities is the sheer complexity of flavour profile that gets concentrated and concentrated through the distillation process into the flavours that we encounter on this instance in single malt Scotch whisky. And the flavours can range from toffee, chocolate, raisin, peat, vanilla, ginger, sultana, spices, herbs, floral. It's extraordinary. And not only that, in the alcohol, it's not static. It's only static while it's in the bottle, but it will continue to develop in the bottle given sufficient time. It's called old bottle effect. It's partly to do with the glass that's used, the minerality in the glass, but it's more than that. So whatever anybody tells you out there, even the experts, they're only telling you part of what's really going on. Now, with this particular whisky, it has a notable bitter element. And this leads me now, having set the scene here with my commentary over the last few minutes, it sets me the scene for me to introduce to you the sensations and how we react to them. Okay? Where's my board? Here it is. My sensation board. Starting with sweet. a nice big yellow line, big sunshine line for sweet. As humans, sweetness is a very welcome sensation. Historically, sweetness was a sign of energy, of sugars, of sustenance, of concentrated refined carbohydrates, and therefore to consume something sweet could be a lifesaver. But within humans, it has morphed into an addiction. And in the modern food industry, to sell food at a higher price and a greater volume, and to encourage people to consume more food than they need so as to be obese and to encounter all these health problems, the number one additive, the number one, is sugar. Pure, white and deadly. There's a book called that. Have a look at the book if you want to really know about sugar. But sweetness occurs in whiskey. It can be there as part of the natural distilled profile of a single malt, so that in new make spirits you will notice that there's a certain sweetness and a lightness, particularly in lowland single malts and in some Speyside single malts like Cardew and some Highland single malts like Fettercairn. They tend to be naturally sweet profile whiskies, and therefore they do not need much in the way of sweetness in casks. Otherwise it goes over the top. But hey, when we're now in the age where people are buying sugar added alcopop liqueurs, Athelbros, good example. I don't take it seriously as a liqueur, to be honest. The only liqueurs I take seriously are Lochinora and Drambuie. Both are excellent liqueurs. But that's another subject. Sweetness is the first thing that someone getting into a whiskey will gravitate to and enjoy. It's one reason why people add lemonade and Coca-Cola to blended scotch. Another sensation which people are quite happy with is sour. Sweet and sour go together. It's the mainstay of Chinese takeaway cuisine on the high street of the UK and other countries. Sweet and sour complement each other. They juxtapose. No, I'll better change. I'll find another word because I'm completely mispronouncing that. They delightfully contradict one another, successfully so that a sweet and sour whiskey is something that's a very accessible whiskey. It's one of the baseline sensations in most whiskies, sweet and sour. It adds the appearance, to a certain extent, the illusion of complexity. It adds the beginnings of complexity, particularly in young whiskies which haven't been aged for very long. So you'll find that sweet and sour dominates in non-aged statement single malts where the signature of the still is quite strong and it's not quite matured yet. Then salt. We like a little bit of salt. Oops a daisy. We like a little bit of salt in some of our malts, but it depends on the malt. We don't really like salt in lowland single malts, but we do like salt in Highland and Islay single malts. You'll find it in Bruichladdich. You get that saline note. They call it nautical because it's quite restrained, and it needs to be restrained to be successful. Noticeable but suggested rather than imposed. If you've ever added some salt or brine to whiskey, don't know if you have, just a wee touch of seawater would do absolutely fine. It wrecks it, ruins it, destroys it. So when it comes to salt, less is more. It doesn't appear in too many whiskies. You'll find it in Old Pulteney, Bruichladdich, as I mentioned. You'll find it occasionally in Laphroaig. You'll find it in some of the Highland whiskies now and again. Glenord. I've noticed a little bit of salinity in Glenord. But in fact, less is more. So we're really looking at sweet and sour being the dominant, which is why I put them first. This is what you'll notice. When you get a little bit of salt, if you're inexperienced, you're fine. However, when we get to, let's see, savoury. Oh, things start to get more complex. Savoury malts include Mortlach. Let's start with Mortlach. It is the beast of Dufftown, etc. It is notable for being savoury. Savoury whiskies are very much an acquired taste, but we do acquire them over time as our palate gets more experienced with sweet and sour and enjoys a little bit of salt now and again, starts to get bearings there, and then a little bit of sweet and sour, maybe the sour's diminished, a bit more savoury in there. You'll find these savoury notes in matured Glenfarclas's. I mentioned Mortlach. You'll find it in Longrow. You'll find it in Springbank. You'll most certainly find it in Edryddur and the peated version of Edryddur called Belechin. These are old school, old-fashioned single malts which are not frightened to deliver the flavour that they create. They are an absolute treasure trove for the experienced malt drinker. The experienced malt drinker, you will gravitate to these savoury malts and you will treasure them when you get a good bottling. Because I notice there's less good bottlings than there used to be. And then finally, bitter. Now, bitter. See that big jaggy line they put there? Bitter is the most hard to access sensation in whisky. Notable whiskies that include bitterness are Old Pulteney and Benromach. Many whiskies, along with sweet and sour, will have a little touch of bitterness, but they're not prominent bitterness. And unfortunately, whiskies that are bitter, that are overtly bitter, and it could be due to the cask influence, because casks can create bitterness, because casks create so much due to the uniqueness of the provenance of even a single cask. It's quite extraordinary. When you've got 500 plus chemicals in the wood alone, which can influence not just the flavour of whisky, but the sensation of whisky and the form of the whisky, you see how complicated it gets. But see, when you actually analyse the 5 basic sensations and address them, and then what you're going to do, and I'm going to come back to this as an extra later, you start to isolate the sensations and experience them on your palate in isolation. So that if, for example, you had a bitter whisky which really wasn't to your taste, what you'd do is you'd get your bitter draft, your little bitter tonic, and you'd take a wee bit in your tongue and, oh, really, really bitter. But what it does is when it comes to the whisky, it negates the sweetness. So it negates the bitterness of that whisky. Likewise with a sweet whisky that's too sweet for you. If you taste a wee bit of sugar in your tongue and sweeten up your palate, then you taste the whisky, it'll taste drier. But hey, passing on the knowledge, this is what it's all about. I'm Ralphie. I hope you've enjoyed this little session. I've been really going into a bit more detail about the sensations. And I'm going to conclude by saying, when you start off with whisky, this is the one that you'll like the most. then this, the sweet and sour. That's the one you're going to enjoy. That's why Glenfiddich is always a great single malt to start with. And then you'll discover a little bit of saltiness and you'll enjoy that. Then you'll discover the savoury. And then finally, you'll taste something that makes you go, oh, and that's the bitter. But let me tell you, as an experienced, cynical, old hack of the whiskey game, having bought all these bottles over 40 years, you know, I've forgotten how many I've bought. But many times I've tasted that bitterness, and initially I didn't like it, but latterly I've really come to include it in the profile of a whiskey because it's so rare and it's such a valuable aspect of a whiskey sensation, and it's been engineered out of modern whiskies. So when you come across a bitter whiskey, it's something special. That bitterness, and it's slightly dominant. And if it's slightly dominant and you're noticing and you go, oh, it's too bitter, add a drop of whiskey to your glass. Add a drop of water to your glass of whiskey and just leave it for an hour with the lid on it. Come back and you will find that the whiskey has rearranged itself. It's recalibrated itself during that time. And you may find that the sensation of bitterness has diminished because the flavours can remain, but sensations can change as a whiskey evolves in the glass, oxidisation and a drop of water over the space of a period of time before you drink it. When you drink it slow, the further you will go. Malt mates, I'm Ralphie, delivering the energy, delivering the love, delivering the malt moments for you. And I hope you find this valuable and useful, and if you do, subscribe. And one might want to pop along to my Patreon channel where I give extra and occasional live streams. So there you have it. Now you know. Bye-bye.